Welcome to Tiafo Garage, where we try it and find out. On this channel, we feature DIY on some classic cars. We also chronicle the classic car ownership experience here in the San Francisco Bay Area in California.
Tiafo Garage.
Okay, project number 3 on this fancy oil change is there's an oil level sensor inside the oil tank that is here on 72s. And it hasn't worked on this car for apparently 20 years. I saw an old service record that said it didn't work back in like 2000. I've got a new one here. I believe this is the wire that's supposed to be connected to it. So right now it's not even connected. So first thing I'm gonna do is plug in this guy. That's the device. That goes, oh, it's only got one plug. That's interesting. I'll have to figure that out. Anyway, that goes inside the oil tank. I think that's the universal color for ground, I believe, so maybe that's the signal. I'm gonna plug this thing into those wires and see whether the gauge changes when I move that. And then we'll have to figure out how to take this out. It's obviously been drained. And then stick this in. There's a gasket in there. So we'll hopefully be able to know our oil level once again. All right, this is a little ridiculous even for me, but this was the only thing I could think of that had these alligator clips. I need to get some clips. Anyway, I hooked up the signal wire to the new sensor. And for the ground, I shoved this wire into the ground terminal and connected it to my alligator clip thing here. And then connected that to the brake rotor inside there. I did check with my ohm meter that there is continuity between like this bolt and that wire, so I think it's grounded. I'm ready to do the experiment. We've got the key accessory on, just to show you that's the oil level gauge. So when I turn off the car, it goes to nothing. And when I turn on, it's pinned at max. So, that's odd actually, because I'm plugged into the sensor. Is it pinned at max or min? Of course, max. That's not a good sign. Because I plugged it into the new sensor, I'm hoping it moves when I float. I would have thought it would have been at min. Is anything happening?
No.
Nothing?
Negative.
0.
Nothing's changing.
Okay.
Round 2. Unplugging the gauge to see if it'll change the oil meter.
Okay, just disconnected it. Anything?
No change.
No change?
No change.
What I think I'll do is see whether that green and white wire is connected here. Maybe this thing's just not plugged in. It's just popped out by hand, believe it or not. Or whether there's some other color wire. Oh, there's a lot of wires. Looks like they're all hooked up. There's a green and white striped one. Maybe I'll have to see whether that resistance change is getting to that wire when I move. Continuing our troubleshooting here, trying to get that oil level gauge to work. Next thing we're going to do is turn on the accessory key and see whether there's 12 volts getting to those 2 signals over there at the sensor when it's an accessory. I think there should be. Here's our cables. Okay, we got our 2 cables here. 1 volt and 1.5 volts. Yeah, it goes to millivolts when it's off. Let me turn off the accessory and see if that's nothing. Okay, I turned off the accessory and now no volts. All right, so it gets 1.5 volts when the key is turned to accessory. Interesting. So the next thing I'm going to check is the voltage from the ground to that green and white striped wire, which I think is the one connected to the signal. It was green and striped this way on the other end. I'm going to see if there's voltage on the instrument with and without the accessory. Without the key in the accessory position, it was 0 volts, and with the key in the accessory position, it was 8 volts from the brown wire ground to this striped green and white wire. I'm thinking I'll take the float and actually bring it up here and just plug it in and see if the gauge and the float are working properly. All right, this is where one of those alligator clip things would really help me, but anyway, I jury-rigged a wire that I just shoved onto that terminal, disconnected the green and white striped one there, connected this red wire to the terminal on the sensor. I put a little extender on there so it won't hit the ground. And then like before, my ground setup is ridiculous with this clamp, and I'm gonna ground that to the instrument and see whether that gauge moves. I'll try to set up the camera here so we can see it. And it's still pinned up, which you would expect, but when I close the circuit, oops, there goes my ground. Reconnect that to the clamp. Okay, I'll try to ground it to the gauge. That is what we want to see. Here we go. Sweet. So I don't know if you can see that, but as I move this, that needle moves. So now we know the instrument works and the sensor works, and it works properly, right? Low. So that's good. Now we just need to figure out gotta get the signal over to the tank wires. So now we gotta chase down where the cables go. Worst case, I'll just run a new line somehow to the gauge, but I'm gonna try using this thing, which is, it's kind of clever device. It puts a signal through the wire that you're trying to hunt down, and then a little wand looks for that signal. We'll see if we can trace where the wire goes, either the one from the gauge or the one from the sender, or both. So this is interesting. I've hooked up the thing, I think, correctly here. I've got the sender putting the signal through a lead here. It's just grabbing onto the metal pad there. And the wire comes up here, and then I connected the black to ground so it has a loop. And this thing makes a noise when you're parallel to the signal. So it's showing very strong here, but interestingly, the minute I get over here, it's actually very weak. So I'm thinking maybe it's as simple as it's been pinched here. So I'm gonna open that up and take a look. It seems like maybe a break in there. Hate to open up factory wiring, but it seems warranted in this case. See that? Weak, strong. Weak, strong. So I'm thinking that little nick right there, maybe the wire is just broken or barely touching. Oop. All right, definitely broken. That broke way too easily, and you can see evidence of the metal. This is a good sign. Let's try to solder it up. Easier said than done. I'm soldering it up. Every time I try to peel back the insulation, it just breaks the wire. So I'll just use a knife and cut away the insulation carefully. So I got this flashlight on Temu, the shop like a billionaire ad on the Super Bowl, but it was like, I want to say $10, maybe 12, but it's like exactly what I need right now, so I'm very glad I got it. Much better for lighting. So we got this side here and this side here. I've got most of the insulation off. There's still a little bit to get there, you can see. We're just gonna clean both ends with a little isopropyl alcohol here. You're gonna get the length about right. So very important, before you solder, put on your heat shrink tubing. I'm gonna do one for each of these two joints, and then a couple of big ones for the actual overall band. Here's my little jumper. Just try to set that up so I can solder it. And let's see what happens here. There's our top one, there's our bottom one. We'll put the heat shrink over them, and then we'll do a little woo test. Aha! See that? Now it's strong up here too. What'll be interesting to see is if it goes all the way to the gauge. But that seemed to fix it. So definite progress. I'm sure this makes me weird, but I find this is one of life's great pleasures, doing the heat gun on the heat shrink. It's plugged in. Good strong signal. All the way up there. It goes into the engine compartment, and we're getting a good signal all the way up there. And by the way, the ground connects to this ground here. So it's got a pretty short path. So let's see if the gauge works. That would be a miracle. We've got our setup here with our lovely grounding device and the wire hooked up to the sensor. So now I gotta put the ignition on, set up the camera, and see what happens. Well, if you just saw that, you saw that it worked. So that's great. The wiring's set. We are done with that diagnostic project. I was planning on taking out that tank while I have the oil out. However, because that's gonna be some effort, in order to take out the tank, I'm gonna have to remove this, those, plus whatever goes to the filler. And since I'm gonna be doing the flares and I'll have to take it out anyway. I'm gonna save it for that time. So it's good. I did all this work for fixing the wiring, so we'll be good to go for when I do take out the tank. When we do the flares in earnest, I need to learn to weld first, but once I do that, we'll hook up the new sender. So success, woohoo! Time to put oil back in the car and enjoy it for a bit before we get into the big weld project. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you enjoy this type of content, please do like, share, and subscribe. It will help the channel, and we will see you next time on Tiafel Garage.